Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. If we trace the origins of the most powerful magical artifacts in history, the Deathly Hallows, the trail always leads back to one family, the Peverells. Three brothers whose story exists somewhere between myth and memory, remembered in children's tales, but also immortalized in wizarding history. To begin to unravel their story, we have to separate myth from memory, and uncover the truth buried beneath 1,000 years of legend. And there's no better place to start than the story every wizard knows by heart, first written down by Beedle the Bard in the 15th century, the tale of the three brothers. There were once three brothers who were traveling along a lonely, winding road at twilight. In time, the brothers reached a river, too deep to wade through and too dangerous to swim. However, these brothers were learned in the magical arts, and so they simply waved their wands and made a bridge appear across the treacherous water. They were halfway across it when they found their path blocked by a hooded figure, and Death spoke to them. He was angry that he had been cheated out of 3 new victims, for travelers usually drowned in the river. But Death was cunning. He pretended to congratulate the three brothers upon their magic, and said that each had earned a prize for having been clever enough to evade him. The oldest brother, who was a combative man, asked for a wand more powerful than any in existence, a wand that must always win duels for its owner, a wand worthy of a wizard who had conquered death. So Death went to an elder tree on the banks of the river, fashioned a wand from a branch that hung there, and gave it to the oldest brother. Then the second brother, who was an arrogant man, decided that he wanted to humiliate Death still further, and asked for the power to recall others from death. So Death picked up a stone from the riverbank and gave it to the second brother, and told him that the stone would have the power to bring back the dead. And then Death asked the third and youngest brother what he would like. The youngest brother was the humblest and also the wisest of the three, and he did not trust Death. So he asked for something that would enable him to go forth from that place without being followed by Death. And Death, most unwillingly, handed over his own cloak of invisibility. Then Death stood aside and allowed the three brothers to continue on their way, and they did so, talking with wonder of the adventure they had had and admiring Death's gifts. In due course, the brothers separated, each for his own destination. The first brother travelled on for a week or more, and reaching a distant village, sought out a fellow wizard with whom he had once quarrelled. Naturally, with the Elder Wand as his weapon, he could not fail to win the duel that followed. Leaving his enemy dead upon the floor, the oldest brother proceeded to an inn, where he boasted loudly of the powerful wand he had snatched from Death himself, and of how it made him invincible. That very night, another wizard crept upon the oldest brother as he lay, wine-sodden upon his bed. The thief took the wand and, for good measure, slit the oldest brother's throat, and so Death took the first brother for his own. Meanwhile, the second brother journeyed to his own home, where he lived alone. Here, he took out the stone that had the power to recall the dead and turned it thrice in his hand. To his amazement and his delight, the figure of the girl he had once hoped to marry before her untimely death appeared at once before him. Yet she was sad and cold, separated from him as by a veil. Though she had returned to the mortal world, she did not truly belong there and suffered. Driven mad with hopeless longing, the second brother killed himself so as truly to join her, and so Death took the second brother for his own. But though Death searched for the third brother for many years, he was never able to find him. It was only when he had attained a great age that the youngest brother finally took off the cloak of invisibility and gave it to his son. Then he greeted Death as an old friend and went with him gladly, and, as equals, they departed this life. Beedle's work, The Tales of Beedle the Bard, was a collection of moral fables passed down to wizarding children for generations, teaching lessons about compassion, humility, and the responsible use of magic. And most of his stories, The Wizard and the Hopping Pot, The Fountain of Fair Fortune, Babbity Rabbity and Her Cackling Stump, were clearly fantastical. But the tale of the three brothers was different, and the more we uncover about wizarding history, the harder it becomes to dismiss it as simple myth. And that's because the brothers in Beedle's tale mirror 3 real wizards who lived centuries earlier: Antioch, Cadmus, and Ignotus Peverell. There's also the fact that these items, the 3 fabled Deathly Hallows, do exist. It's just that their backstory is a little foggy, Beedle's version of the story is popular, but like many legends passed down through the ages, it's difficult to know how much of it is fact and how much has been embellished over time. So the lingering question remains of how much of this story is true. Was Death truly a physical entity who handed out these magical objects, or were the Peverell brothers simply extraordinary wizards who were able to create the Hallows through their own skill and ambition? Pushing the envelope even further, I can't help but wonder if Beedle's version of the story was simply entirely fictionalized. Beedle never claimed his tale was real, yet he never denied it either. There are no earlier sources describing the three brothers, no records of where Beedle heard the story, and no evidence he invented it himself. For centuries, wizards assumed it was fiction, until these supposed gifts of death began reappearing in the real world. The discovery of these artifacts raised a question that's never been answered. Did Beedle capture an ancient truth in story form, or did his story create the myth that history later tried to match? What we do know is that the Peverell name wasn't born in a storybook. Long before Beedle the Bard ever put quill to parchment, the Peverell family was already known throughout Britain as one of the earliest pure bloodlines, a powerful wizarding house whose origins can be traced back to the Middle Ages. Records indicate that the three brothers lived in or near Godric's Hollow, coincidentally the very same village that would later become deeply important to wizarding history. Their names, and the artifacts associated with them, mirror Beedle's story with uncanny precision. Antioch was said to possess a wand of unparalleled power, Cadmus a stone that could summon the dead, and Ignotus a cloak that concealed him from all detection. According to Dumbledore's analysis in the Tales of Beedle the Bard, the story of death was likely symbolic, a myth that formed around three wizards whose creations were so extraordinary that later generations could only explain them through supernatural means. Whether they met death on a lonely road, I think it more likely that the Peverell brothers were simply gifted, dangerous wizards who succeeded in creating those powerful objects. The story of them being Death's own Hallows seems to me the sort of legend that might have sprung up around such creations. Dumbledore's interpretation makes sense, but it isn't universally accepted. Some still believe the Hallows predate even the brothers themselves, existing as manifestations of Death's power long before the Peverell line began. And the truth might lie somewhere in between, part legend, part history, preserved across centuries of retelling. Unlike many ancient families whose histories were lost to time, the Peverells left traces everywhere, inscriptions, genealogies, and, most tellingly, their descendants. In Godric's Hollow, where the youngest brother, Ignotus, was laid to rest, his grave still bears the unmistakable symbol of the Deathly Hallows, the triangle, circle, and line. Below it, an inscription reads, "The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death." Over time, the Peverells divided into three distinct branches, each mirroring the fates described in Beedle's tale. Antioch Peverell, the eldest, was said to have been killed for his unbeatable wand. His line ended there, extinguished as violently as it began. However, between Antioch's death and the wand's arrival in Grigorovich's possession, it passed through numerous blood-stained hands, including that of the infamous wizard Loxias, whose own mother murdered him for it. Each master died as the wand demanded, ensuring its legend grew darker with every generation. Cadmus Peverell, the second brother, had a bloodline that would carry far darker weight. His branch eventually merged with that of Salazar Slytherin, producing the Gaunt family, known for their obsession with purity and ancestry. From this line came Marvolo Gaunt, his daughter Merope, and her son Tom Marvolo Riddle, also known as Voldemort. Through Cadmus, Voldemort inherited the Resurrection Stone, concealed for centuries within the Gaunt family ring. The ring itself was not proudly displayed, but buried beneath the floor of the crumbling Gaunt shack, lost to memory until rediscovered by Morphin Gaunt and later stolen by Tom Riddle. For centuries, its true power remained unrecognized, mistaken for nothing more than a family heirloom. Ignotus, the youngest and wisest of the three, lived the longest. His cloak of invisibility was passed down through his descendants, eventually reaching his great-granddaughter Iolanthe Peverell, who married Hardwin Potter of Stinchcombe. Through that union, the cloak became a Potter family heirloom, carried down the generations until it was passed to Harry Potter himself. Unlike any other invisibility cloak ever crafted, Ignotus's cloak never faded, never tore, and never weakened, proof that it was not woven from demiguise hair or spellwork, but created by magic beyond modern understanding. Dumbledore himself noted its enduring perfection as evidence of its singular nature. By the 20th century, 2 surviving bloodlines could trace their ancestry back to the Peverell brothers. The Potters descended from Ignotus, and the Gaunts descended from Cadmus. 2 branches of the same family tree, one producing the boy who would accept death, and the other the man who would deny it. When it comes to when the brothers lived, however, the timeline doesn't quite match up. Beedle the Bard wrote the tales of Beedle the Bard in the 15th century, but Pottermore places Ignotus Peverell in the 12th century, roughly 300 years earlier, which means Beedle wasn't recording recent history. He was retelling a legend already centuries old. His tale wasn't the beginning of their story, but the echo of it, a myth shaped by time around 3 real wizards whose creations outlived them all. After the deaths of Antioch, Cadmus, and Ignotus, the Deathly Hallows vanished into legend. Each artifact passed from one generation to the next, sometimes lost, sometimes stolen, but always finding its way back into the pages of wizarding history. Even the symbol of the Hallows itself became corrupted over time. During Grindelwald's rise, it was mistaken by many for his personal emblem, a mark of terror rather than enlightenment. The meaning of the brothers' creation was twisted, just as their gifts had been. After the deaths of Antioch, Cadmus, and Ignotus, the Deathly Hallows slipped from history into legend. Each artifact passed through generations, sometimes lost, sometimes stolen, but always resurfacing in moments of great consequence. Of the 3, the Elder One's path was the most violent. From Antioch, murdered in his sleep, the wand passed through centuries of bloodshed, each new master falling to the next. Eventually it came into the possession of the wandmaker Miku Gorovich, only to be stolen by a young wizard with golden hair, Gellert Grindelwald. Grindelwald wielded it to wage war across Europe until Albus Dumbledore defeated him in 1945. Decades earlier, Dumbledore and Grindelwald had shared an obsession with the Hallows, believing that uniting them would make them masters of death. That pursuit of power became their downfall, ending in tragedy and the duel that defined their lives. Years later, the wand was stolen again, this time from Dumbledore's tomb by Lord Voldemort, who sought to make it his ultimate weapon. But as history so often repeats, Voldemort misunderstood the wand's loyalty. In the end, it answered not to him, but to Harry Potter, its rightful master. After the final battle, Harry returned it to Dumbledore's resting place, ensuring that its bloody legacy would finally end with him. The Resurrection Stone followed a quieter, yet equally tragic journey. Hidden for centuries within the Gaunt family ring, it was mistaken for a mere heirloom until Tom Riddle claimed it and turned it into a Horcrux. Dumbledore later left it inside a golden snitch for Harry to find. In the Forbidden Forest, moments before his own death, Harry turned it thrice in his hand, just as Cadmus once had, and faced mortality surrounded by those he loved. When he dropped it, the stone vanished once more, buried among the roots of the forest. Only one Hallow was ever used as it was meant to be. Ignotus's cloak of invisibility passed from parent to child, offering protection rather than power. Unlike the other 2, it carried no curse, only wisdom. In Harry's hands, it fulfilled its purpose, not to cheat death, but to meet it with courage. For a fleeting moment, Harry united all 3 Hallows, the first person to do so in centuries. But unlike those before him, he did not seek to master them. He let the stone fall, returned the wand, and kept only the cloak, the gift of his ancestor, the one Hallow uncorrupted by greed. In that act, Harry became the true master of death, not by conquering it, but by accepting it. Each brother, in the end, represents one of the 3 human responses to mortality: Antioch's ambition, Cadmus's grief, and Ignotus's acceptance. The same lessons echo through their descendants, Voldemort and Harry, showing that history, like magic, repeats itself in cycles. The brothers who once defied death became symbols of what it meant to face it: the proud, the grieving, and the wise. Their creations, forged from myth, remain a testament to the oldest lesson in magic, that power may endure, but only acceptance brings peace. And so in the end, the tale of the Peverell brothers is not about cheating death, it's about learning how to meet it, as Ignotus once did, as an old friend. And that's it for today's video. Which history lesson do you want next? Let me know down in the comment section below. Until next time, remember, it does not do to dwell on dreams, and to forget to live.